I'll hand over now to Dimitrios to run his session on peace and humanitarian education. Thank you, Dimitrios.
Many thanks for this very warm introduction, and thank you all, ladies and gentlemen, for joining me in this session today and for devoting some of your precious time to listen about peace and humanitarian education. So within the next, I would say, 40 minutes, I'm going to go through some of the elements of peace and humanitarian education. Why is it important for me, and why am I bringing this into the discussion? And then I would be very much open to questions and comments, and also be able to interact even after the session. I would be happy to share my know-how, my insights into the topic, and also collaborate with anyone who might be interested. So the title of my presentation is Peace and Humanitarian Education, Driving Education Within the Deep Waters of Global Uncertainty. This might sound a bit of a pompous title, so let me give a bit of a context why I consider peace and humanitarian education as an important element of the educational agenda, the educational curricula nowadays. Basically, the world, as I see it and as we all see it, is experiencing constantly various forms of war, conflict, which can be armed or non-armed, and of course crisis. To our minds, wars or conflicts normally are related to death, but it's not only that. So except for atrocities and death, war, conflicts, and crises also mean people being left without homes, jobs, undergoing health issues, poverty, food insecurity, malnutrition, internal and external displacement, becoming refugees, experiencing sexual and gender-based violence. We see an emergence of new forms of modern slavery and ongoing insecurity and the need for protection. As you can see, I have put the new forms of modern slavery into bold, and this is why I would like to share with you some latest data published from the Walk Free, which is an Australian-based human rights organization, on their 2014 Global Slavery Index, where they observed that nowadays 35.8 million women, men, and children are considered as modern slaves, and they observe also a rise of 20% compared to 2013. And if you're wondering what kind of new forms of modern slavery we're talking about human trafficking, we're talking about sexual exploitation, abuse and rape, we're talking about forced labor, and we're talking about forced marriages. Furthermore, this kind of conflicts, crisis, and death and wars bring an emerging global financial requirements in order to cover these kind of humanitarian needs. And based on the United Nations 2014 humanitarian report, global humanitarian report, and the status of 2014, we're looking at on a $17.3 billion required as a financial assistance in order to cover these kind of humanitarian needs. So this dark picture shows that war, conflict, and crisis result in an emerging need for redefining the way peace and humanitarian action are perceived, and at the same time trying to see how education could include these kind of elements into creating some more finer-grained topics in the existing educational curricula. So, what is happening around the world? I'm sure you all been following the news. We're talking about Syria, Central African Republic, South Sudan, where we see regional crisis with political, security, development, and humanitarian consequences. We see different crises in Somalia, Haiti, Myanmar, Djibouti, Sudan, Mali, the occupied Palestinian territory, and Afghanistan. Of course, in recent terms, we see also political upheaval and social unrest in Ukraine and Gaza. The Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines a couple of months ago affected 11.3 million people, and at least 6,200 people were killed. And of course, the unprecedented outbreak of the Ebola virus, which is creating also a spillover effect to many countries around, and it also results into having part of the African continent completely and totally isolated, and people in need for support, medical support, and of course creating such a global insecurity about the spread out of the deadly virus. Before showing to you the next slide, I would usually advise for viewer discretion, but I'm not going to do it this time, because I'd like you to share these very, very bad pictures, these pictures which are showing many kinds of atrocities around the world. And the reason why I'm showing this to you is not to make you feel disgusted or to make you feel sad, but really to raise to you and acknowledge the awareness of the fact that all these things are happening within our own world. These pictures are not taken from outer space. These pictures are not taken in another planet. These pictures are taken from Earth. These pictures are taken in where we all live, in neighboring countries. And these pictures show people like us, people who live in our world, and people who have been deprived of their freedom, deprived of their well-being, deprived of their peace, deprived of their health, deprived of their human dignity and basic human rights. And people who have been affected not only by war, but by also different types of conflict, by terrorist attacks, by viruses, by conflict, by different types of conflicts, and people who really, really, really are in need for assistance and support. So, looking upon the global picture, I'm sharing with you these two maps, one now and one on the next slide. And you can see where we can map different types of conflicts and different types of wars around the globe, and also different countries which are in need for humanitarian action. And of course, you can see that lots of places in our world are indeed in need for such an action, and are in need for also redefining the way we define peace and the way we really introduce peace into our educational in our education. Again, the United Nations Global Humanitarian Overview Status Report, August 2014, shows a country overview of many, many different types of crises and many, many different types of humanitarian actions that have been taken. We can see in Africa, we can see also parts of Asia, and also a bit parts of Latin America, where there is an emerging need for humanitarian action and humanitarian awareness. A very important issue that comes from this situation is the emerging rise of poverty, and poverty not only in terms of numerical terms, but also in terms of deprivation of basic human needs and basic human elements, and basic well-being elements for having a quality of life. And leading in the 21st century, in the year 2014, and in a 1 month we're going to have Christmas, so we're entering the new year 2015, looking at these figures and looking at this kind of emerging numbers of people who are considered as poor in any kind of definition, this is not what the 24th century world should look like. And based on the World Economic Forum, we see many great challenges that the world will be facing in 2015. So we see the world such as inequality, we see the world such as corruption, we see words such as need for education and development, we see words such as unemployment, we see words such as conflict and country relations. So we observe a global dynamic of uncertainty and going into some deep waters of global uncertainty in terms of trying to address multipolar and multifaceted challenges. So let me quote from the United Nations Global Humanitarian Overview. On page 3, they say that 2014 has seen a major surge in humanitarian crises around the world. Interagency strategic response and regional response plans now target over 76 million people in 31 countries compared to 52 million in December 2013. 102 million people are estimated to be in need for humanitarian assistance compared to 81 million in December 2013. And as I said before, global financial requirements, which are necessary to cover this kind of humanitarian needs, have experienced a rise from 12.9 million in 2013 to 17.3 billion now. So, and of course, this kind of crisis have both a regional and a spillover effect impact in countries which are also, most of them, very fragile. So, my understanding from this piece of text is the fact that we need to stop seeing and perceiving this kind of humanitarian needs are something that does not affect us anymore. That's something that is happening somewhere else in the world. These are needs of people who are similar to us, people who are also citizens of this world, and people who are really in need for assistance and support. And we, as people, as human beings, need to stop perceiving that as a fact and really, really start taking action into this real-life problem. And it is a problem that is knocking our doors. And again, another map from the same report looking upon the humanitarian funding around the globe. So you see how and where these great amount of money is being distributed in order to cover many humanitarian needs emerge as a result of either war, conflict, and different types of crises, and the establishment of different humanitarian action plans. So going back to the context of the content of my presentation, I would like to see and introduce to you my thinking about why peace and humanitarian education needs to become a new approach and form of action to raise awareness in global real-life problems. And the reason why I am very interested into these types of this type of approach is that I think it's about time to start creating a global awareness that these problems really exist, that this is a situation that needs to be addressed, and it needs to be put on top of the agenda, because these kind of issues are not seen, should not be only seen as from a short term perspective, but they have long-term effects and consequences which are not apparently seen from the very beginning. So, driving education within the deep waters of global uncertainty. As I said before, wars, conflicts, and fear and uncertainty are part of our lives. If you turn on the news every single day, I'm sure that the 2 or 3 headlines are involving headlines from countries where they've been experiencing different conflicts, where they've been experiencing wars, they've been experiencing a need for humanitarian action. And we see that in every single corner of the world, there are nations and countries experiencing death and humanitarian needs to these ongoing conflicts, which are internal, external, bilateral, or unilateral. I'm afraid to say that children are the main victims of these conflicts, not only in terms of numerical terms of growing number of deaths, but also in terms of deprivation to educational opportunities, schooling, access to resources, food, water, clothing, and safety. Needless to say, of course, that the psychological burden and the impact of this kind of war or conflict experience in a child's development process is unprecedented. And this is very important, and I will speak a bit about it later, that how can you really make sure a child that has experienced and lived death in his or her daily life can really heal these inner this inner bleeding and this inner psychological burden and this psychological death inside its human DNA. And I've been living in a country. I originally come from Greece, which is a considered as a developed or the developed country in the European Union, of course, with many problems, especially in terms of the financial crisis. So I've been living in a country which is considered one of the richest one in Europe, maybe the richest. So I like to observe a lot of what is happening around, how people really observe what is happening around them. So I fully agree. Yeah, thank you, Shiv. I fully agree. I see that the rest of the world is simply looking around, being mainly inactive, because they don't know how to contribute, they don't want to contribute, or they don't understand the necessity to raise awareness and help. And this is, I think, where the key point of addressing a need for including peace education and humanitarian action within the educational curricula, starting from young children. Really understanding that these pictures, these horrific pictures that I showed before, happen within our territory, happen within our own world, happen within people who are like us. So raising awareness on a global scale, starting from school, becomes an important parameter of global action in order to safeguard sustainable peace and to soothe the pain of the citizens in need for humanitarian action. And needless to say that, of course, the capacity of international organizations such as United Nations, UNICEF, and all these NGOs are in need for individual support and collective action in order to address all these emerging needs, which are not, as I repeat, which are not only financial, but they're mainly in need for new skills, for new attributes, for new personality traits, for people who really understand the need for addressing and for empowering humanitarian action and redefining the way peace is perceived nowadays. So, if we put this into context, I would say that peace and humanitarian education are at a crossroads, because understanding the context of peace is very much related to understanding what humanitarian education means. So, as I said again, it is important about raising awareness about the importance of peace and humanitarian education within a globalized environment. And this will happen through and via endorsing the experiential learning of peace and humanitarian education in the context of the international agenda. And what I mean here is that people really need to experience and really need to see with their own eyes what is happening in terms of crisis and in terms of establishing a picture, a real picture of what is happening in our world, and really acknowledging the fact that peace is really fragile, it should not be taken for granted, and it is something that is being challenged every single moment in all over the world. So I believe that where peace and humanitarian education meet is where there will be a creation of a global competency which will be able to empower responsible active citizenship and global citizenship. So we need a new type of leadership, we need a new type of citizens who are active, who are responsible, and who are ready to address and acknowledge such kind of actions. And of course, this will happen through nurturing global effective collaboration. And I think this kind of platform and this kind of conference is a true platform for bringing together different views and different aspects and really empowering and a global effective collaboration into really addressing real life problems. Because for me, education is about creating this type of mindset, this type of people, this type of skills and competencies to address real life problems. We really need to stop being in our crystal palaces, I would call it, or crystal spheres, and really acknowledge the fact that, hey, this is happening in our world, so we really need to collaborate all together to address these needs first of all, and then to be able to refrain from putting peace in challenge every single day and every single moment. So I have summarized here my own view of why there is a need for addressing and putting back in the agenda, in the global agenda, in the global discussion, the peace and humanitarian education. in that terms, and based also in the context that I described before, there is a need to contextualize and conceptualize peace and humanitarian action, because things change, technology change, needs change, infrastructure changes, so we need to reestablish this relationship between peace and humanitarian action. And of course, understanding that peace and humanitarian action have a multipolar and multifaceted nature, which is inherent to the cultural, traditional, and political and societal terms of each place that this is happening around the world. This is a very good question of what this actually is. I will try to give my own definition a bit later, if that's okay. So this peace and humanitarian education, we also be able to appreciate the need for people to be educated in peace and humanitarian awareness, and reflect themselves upon various behavioral norms and peculiarities that this kind of education entails for the individual, local, regional, national, and international level. Because in order to address these issues, you need to have a multidimensional mindset and a multidimensional perspective of addressing such kind of needs. And of course, putting back peace, eliminating peace and humanitarian action in the global agenda as a top priority of addressing real life problems. We cannot go on as a world if we still having different types of conflict, if we have war zones around, if we have people suffering. And I'm not saying people who are unemployed or people who don't have all the means, but people who are completely deprived of basic human elements. Basic human elements meaning food, meaning water, meaning security, meaning home, meaning education, meaning the things to start their lives, especially young children and children who are born into war zones and conflict. Of course, when we're talking about peace and humanitarian awareness, human rights, conflict resolution, non-violence, global citizenship, and other terms coming from societal studies need to put in place and need to also to refer to different types of interrelations between these, because at the end of the day, peace is an inherent human right. Everybody needs to deserve to live in a peaceful environment. And of course, recognizing the power of collective intelligence and active listening, because as I said before, we need to start working all together, and I believe that education, any type of education and learning, from experiential, from active, from formal, from non-formal, needs to really start nurture this developmental attitude towards peace and humanitarian education. So right now, what humanitarian education is about the desire or impulse to save lives. So basically, having people join there, offering their voluntary or non-voluntary services in order to be able to address such type of issues and try to save lives, protection of human dignity, reduction and reducing the suffering and soothing the pain of people, offering assistance to others in emergency or crisis, and devoting skills, knowledge, and attitudes of individual and collective level. And also, as I said before, is also about assessing global humanitarian needs, is about applying humanitarian law, values, and principles, and addressing the need for respect of human rights, and also being able to create this common core of knowledge, skills, understanding, and values for children and youth in order to develop this global competency and global understanding of problems. And because I think awareness, and I will keep repeating that, for me, awareness and acknowledging the issue is the starting point of any kind of action. I don't know if I can give a concrete definition of what peace actually is, because peace is something that is so, I would say, so difficult to define, and many people consider peace and perceive peace in their own minds, in their own ways. So I would be very happy to discuss with you any type of definition or any kind of approach on how to define, or if there is a need to define peace summarize, I'd like to give you a bit of an overview of what I think should the pillars of peace and humanitarian education be, and where could educational curricula really develop into addressing this type of issues. So for me, peace and humanitarian education need to establish the citizenship of the world. People who are active global citizens, people who are aware of this global agenda. Secondly, I think it's about trust and commitment. And what I mean about trust and commitment, I mean that we need to address people, to see that people who are willing to assist, who are willing to work with any kind of action and means, and people who can trust the institutions, trust the social and political sphere, and trust also any kind of educational system to really create this kind of mindset. For me, it's also about diversity and empathy. Diversity means availability of different types of resources, different types of ideas, different types of approaches. Empathy means putting your personality into the place of another person, really trying to understand what is actually happening, how this person would feel, how this person is really experiencing death, war, and how the people who are in need to be supported due to crisis and humanitarian needs are really feeling. Active and experiential learning. I've been always following, and I've been always in favor of active learning, meaning that we really need to get out of the classroom, not only in terms of knowledge, but also in terms of understanding and seeing things in action. And this is connected to what I see up to what I put later on voluntary action and collective intelligence. Voluntary work needs to be come on board, needs to be put as an emerging need for addressing this type of action. Emotional intelligence is not very far from empathy, but I think the main difference here is on how do you actually perceive these types of needs per se, in terms of how do you actually put yourself into the kind of position, not only in terms of understanding the feelings of the other people, but also in terms of showing what you can do and how you can do something to prevent future actions against peace and prevent future actions which might require or which will require humanitarian intervention. Human rights, of course, awareness about human rights, awareness about the importance of respect of human rights. Yes, I know. It's also started to happen in Europe, but I strongly believe that voluntary work needs to be really one of the core elements, and it really needs to be put in the core agenda of educational curricula. And I've seen people, because I've been involved also in a couple of NGOs, and we see people who come to work for NGOs, offer their times, and I really see a very much emerging shift into their minds and in the way they have been experiencing and they're experiencing now their vision of the world. Leadership, we're looking upon a different type of personality. We're looking about a new type of leader, a person who is willing to multitask, who is willing to offer skills, personality traits, individual and behavioral norms in order to create this kind of ecosystem. This kind of ecosystem. I'm not going to take much more of your time, so let me go back to my final slide, and I would like to stay here a little bit and close with this one. I received this picture, this photograph a few months ago via Twitter, and I digged a bit on where did this picture come from, and it's actually from Gaza. So I'm not going to go into details of what is happening there, because my aim is not to understand only the historical background here or understand whose fault it is and whose fault it isn't. But looking at the eyes of this young child, and it's something that I also wrote in that the way I see this child in the eyes of this child, it gives me the question of why this is happening. Why am I put in this kind of situation? I don't deserve to be living in a world where I don't know if I'm going to wake up the next day. I don't want to live in a world where I'm living in fear. I don't want to play with bullets. I don't want to play with guns. I want to play with my doll. And also see why is it's keeping its dirty doll is the only possible thing that it has with her to remind her that this is a child and it needs to play. It's keeping their eyes. Yeah. Okay. So it's keeping their eyes closed to prevent her from seeing the atrocities happening around her. So I would like to close this presentation by saying that for me, peace and humanitarian action is our problem, is not their problem. It's a collective problem which needs to be addressed as soon as possible. And I think the starting point is really about educating people, and especially educating young people, to create this new type of citizens and this new type of active leaders to change the emerging problems of our today's world. And with this, I'd like to thank you all very much for this for being part of this presentation. And I'm looking forward to discuss with you any kind of questions and any kind of interactions. Thank you very much.